Well, of course, you can't really start an interview without recognizing that it's very rare for identical twins, to make it together.
Yeah.
I mean, and to stick it out. I
Yeah.
mean, you're brothers, you're twins, and you're fantastic musicians. Do you never row?
We, you know, it's funny because we used to really. I think when we were younger, I just don't know if we knew how to communicate, and as we've gotten older, we've just really learned how to talk to each other. So I mean, I can't remember the last fight we had,
It's
but
been years since we've had a fight, but we used to fight all the time.
But we made a deal when we were 16. We started our band, and we shook hands, and we said we were never going to let anything come between us. We were never going to let money come between us. We were never going to let no matter where it took us. We genuinely we were little kids. We shook hands and we said we were always going to stick together, and we did.
And of course, the other thing is that your music has sustained all these years. I mean, it's not unusual to hear tracks from the 90s and right up to today.
Yeah.
And you're still cutting it, and that's why we're talking to you right now.
We're still trying.
Yeah, but now it's got added purpose, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And Joel, you and your wife, Nicole Ritchie, are UNICEF ambassadors.
Yes.
And the cause you're fighting is against opiates.
Yeah, we over the years I've been fortunate. One of the things that me and my wife share is a passion to do good things together. Especially for our family. We have 2 young children, Harlow and Sparrow. We've always kind of said if we could. We started a children's foundation. We wanted to have something that we could work on together as a family and do with our kids, and hopefully always keep some kind of purpose in our life. And over the years it can shift sometimes. It's generally been children, and we still work on a lot of things that involve kids. But I think.
But this is the whole of society fundamentally that you're fighting for
Yes.
now.
Yes.
And Benji, I'm wondering, having specifically targeted opiates, I mean, have you had experience of opiates?
I mean, think it would be hard to find people who hadn't at this point in our society. I mean, I definitely have, and I definitely have.
An overuse?
Sure, yeah, I think at watching, I've had close relationships with friends and people through the years who have really been hit hard by it, and kind of it's one of those
touched
things.
our lives in so many ways. I don't know that we could count them.
And of course, in the end, when you distill it, there's a huge corporate responsibility for this absolute. It's engulfed American health.
Absolutely.
You see, I don't think we have exactly the same problem in this country, and I'm wondering whether it might be because we have a national health service, we have a welfare state. You don't.
Yeah, it's tough in America. Look, we're 2 guys who are living the American dream. We love America. We love our country. But every place has its problems. I think when you have a big business, obviously
running things
is always going to be a problem in America. When we lose sight of the humanity and the details, and when things get there's so many things that get lost when big business wins, and I think we've watched this crisis grow, and it's the people that suffer. It's the individuals.
I know, and when we made this new album, and the title's Generation RX, I don't know, we didn't plan on being these advocates for, to fight opioids, I think, but you're surrounded by, and I think every year someone passes away, or
You lose someone.
You lose someone.
Well,
They're
Prince,
real people.
he died of opiates.
Yeah.
I mean, the list is really long. I mean, and I mean, you look at around you, and when we made this record, we weren't setting out to fight a battle. We just wanted to be honest, You know, and I think
Share our experience.
Share our experience, and when at the end of the record, when we looked at the content, that we kind of decided we were just going to kind of really just open our minds up and just kind of write subconsciously. You know, we didn't plan what this record was going to be about. We said we were just going to try and just relate our feelings honestly.
Well, there was a very specific moment in May this year. You performed this track for Lil Peep.
Little Peep, yeah.
Yeah, Lil
Your
Peep.
super fan, as you call, and died of opiates.
We were super fans of his, and you know, he was such a talented young guy, had his whole life in front of him, and died from, you know, an accidental overdose, and it was just it brought to a head something that we've been experiencing. We've lost a lot of people that we've been close with, and ultimately we asked the question why. We asked the question, where does this come from, and where does this pain come from? If we're using painkillers, I have personal experience. I used painkillers years ago. I didn't know why I was doing it. You know, I thought I was being young, having fun. But as I'm older now, as a father, and as someone who's lived a life, and I understand how precious life is and how dangerous that game is.
I think we also wanted to open up the conversation of mental health, and there's such a stigma around even talking about it. Like it's a weird conversation, and I think if we all look in our lives, whether it's our family or personally, everyone has a mental health struggle of some kind.
Well, that's my personal experience, is understanding my own pain and actually coming to terms with trauma you suffer as a child, that you're kind of expected to move on from it. So you tell yourself a story of your childhood that you can live with. And I think that ultimately, though, if we're not sharing our experience with other people, they're not, and we're not opening up our real lives to people.
You got to medicate somehow.
Yeah. So to me, that's what I found.
This track that you played at Little
The
Peeps,
memorial, yeah.
Memorial.
Yeah. We played at his memorial. We did "Awful Things," which is a song of his, and then after that, we were having the conversation and we started writing this record, and Actual Pain was the first song we wrote.
So this is really, in a way, a completely new departure, and it turns out to be, without your necessarily intending it, a campaign against opioids.
Majorly, it's so interesting to me that we even came into this conversation, because I'm not someone who shares anything from my personal life ever. I've never been one to open up to people and actually share what I've gone through or what I'm going through, or I've always been very protective of that part of my life.
Understandably, when you're married to very famous women, because you're married to Cameron Diaz.
Yes, I am.
So the two of you bask in a somewhat other world.
Yeah. I think you have to find ways to protect your privacy, and I think that it kind of,
and being protective husbands. I mean, I definitely.
How does music work then in all this? What are you trying to do?
For me, I think for us with music, we had to find our purpose again, because there was nothing else we wanted to accomplish, and
but
so
it also allows you a safe place to be honest. It's almost like if you want the real story, go listen to my record.
But it's touching a nerve, because a lot of people are now taking note of it.
Yes, and it's something that you have to think about almost in real time as the questions come. You have to think, okay, how can I be thoughtful and share my reality, but also protect people that I love? And I've resigned myself to being honest and allowing. I understand we live in a cynical world sometimes, where people are trying to find things to just get clicks. I know there's going to be a part of there's always going to be that element in our lives anyways. And so I've kind of resigned myself to the good of people watching and listening, and I've just kind of said, look, I'm just going to be honest about my life, my experience, my perspective.
So just talk to us about Actual Pain, which after all sums up what we're talking about.
So Actual Pain, the video for me was very important, because it shows a child living with a parent who's struggling with mental health. And I don't think anyone really thinks about kind of the experience and struggle of mental health affects everyone, and so until we can have the conversation, we can't think about the child living with the parent. And that's what this video is all about. It's about a child. It's the relationship of a child and their mother, and living with this dark cloud over them. And it's not one they can talk about. So
It's interesting to say, why is it so hard, and why is there stigma around talking about depression, anxiety, PTSD, any of these things that, you know, I think if we certainly hope and feel that making these more normal conversations between families, between parents and kids, between friends, and coworkers, and you know, just everyone in society, we definitely feel that that's definitely a good agenda to push.
But even preparing for this interview, I mean, I'm amazed. Far more people die of opioids than die of heroin or cocaine.
it's the new, you know, ultimately for me, we've lost so, I couldn't even count the people that I know that we've lost in my life personally, to overdoses.
And the graph is just still shooting up.
It's insane.
And you know, you kind of look around sometimes at the world. This is a perfect example, and you go, doesn't everyone see it? You know,
But are politicians talking about it now in a big way?
I think, unfortunately, we live in a time right now where I feel like there are some really great politicians, but a lot of times that's lost to the noise of in the tone of news, and ultimately if we got to the business of it, and we were talking just impressions, a lot of times news corporations are going after impressions, so we're going after any given moment. What's the subject that's captivating the audience? And so there's a lot lost in the noise.
And in the nicest possible way. I mean, advertising drugs,
Yeah.
legal drugs, prescription drugs, is big business. And it's big business for the media who have to transmit news.
And it's a lot. It is kind of taboo. You know, the alternatives are taboo still. So it's a very tough subject, and I understand the challenges of all the politicians out there that are fighting the good fight.
Do you think music can turn the tide?
I think music shifts culture. So I do think that music has the power to bring it to people's awareness, and I think that we can influence culture as a whole, the artist community, in music and TV and films, and everyone making content and art.
You're in a very blessed condition because you're a UNICEF ambassador.
Yeah.
You're married to a very famous woman as well, to Nicole Richie.
Yeah.
And the two of you could conceivably walk into a big pharma boardroom
Yeah.
and talk to the board members and say, "Do you know what you're doing?"
You know, that's a great concept. I'd like to think that they'd be receptive. Ultimately,
Have you ever tried it?
I haven't tried it. It's hard. You know, that's a great concept though. It's actually not a bad idea.
Because I doubt they'll be listening to your tracks.
No, probably not. Maybe some of them, but
sometimes you just wonder why it's not enough just to read the statistics and see the
humanity.
images.
Isn't it 1,000 people a week die of opioids?
Something like that.
Something like that. You know, I was watching a documentary piece about a guy, and he was a heroin addict, and they were showing his current life, and then he pulled out pictures of his old life, his kids, and he told his story and how he got there, and he was prescribed Oxycontin for a back surgery. He got addicted.
So Oxycontin's a really big time pain
it was in
killer,
the
is it?
2000s. It was
That was the big one.
The big one. It's one that we certainly saw a lot of people's lives change, and a lot of friends of mine struggle with that. And so I watched this person though who had a real life, wife and kids, and he's been reduced to someone who's living in kind of a squat, doing heroin. And I was looking at that, and I had so much compassion and empathy. And I think ultimately the bigger conversation as a whole, as a society, as neighbors, do we have compassion for one another? Do we have empathy? Can we be bought?
Do people understand that what starts with a prescription from the family doctor ends conceivably even with turning to heroin?
I'm not sure anyone understands that because it's such a long process
Yeah.
and it's such a decline that I think it's something that that they'd have to see and really it would have to sink in.
I
They'd
think
have to
I think a lot of people understand it just because they personally have experienced it with family members. And I mean, and another thing I know, is a lot of older family members, who are in, kind of their later years in life, who are dealing with, health problems. And I mean, everybody there's which I don't necessarily get the fight against things like CBD and medical marijuana. In the cannabis industry, to me, I haven't taken a pharmaceutical drug in a long time, because of things like CBD. And what in California, it's so easy for us, to have alternatives. But a lot of people's older family members who are having health problems later in their life get, to think about your one of your grandparents or one of your uncles or aunts who are later in life now basically a heroin addict, because of an injury they had or a surgery. That's happened to countless people. I mean, I think if you asked around, so everyone will have a story they can
I don't
relate
know
to.
that there's a family in America that hasn't been touched by the opioid crisis. That's the sad part.
It's an incredible thought.
Yeah. It's incredible to think about that.
Yeah.
And just back to the music, is this a one-off, this album, or do you think you are beginning to explore
Well,
an
I think,
evolving theme?
I think if you look back at our history, we've always kind of been a band that, kind of gave a social commentary, and we added a little bit of humor and sarcasm. But we also had more serious moments. In 2002, we made a record where we partnered with the Hotline for Suicide Prevention with a song of ours called "Hold On," because suicide had touched several of our lives and some of the guys in the band. And it was something that we really just wanted to do for, personally. And that was one of the more important moments of our career with our fans. That song with our fans has always been a really special connection because, again, it's something that's touched so many people's lives.
But it's interconnected. Mental health is still something that we've got to fight to make okay for all of us to share our own experience. Our mental health is a real thing, and I think it's still something that people have trouble sharing. And so I'd ultimately love to see a world where we can all talk about mental health the way we talk about everything else.
When you're living the dream, it's very hard to talk about the nightmare.
Yes. Yeah.
Well put.
And I think all of our videos on this record are going to have a running theme. The latest video we just made, Shadow Boxer, same thing. It's people looking in the mirror, having conversations with themselves, and we're asking the question, when you look in the mirror, what are you telling yourself?
What do you say to
Do you
yourself?
love yourself? Do you hate yourself? Are you coming to terms with your own struggles? So I think that is the big question: is are we all asking ourselves are we asking ourselves those questions?
What did you say to yourself when you looked in the mirror today?
It's a bloody good question, isn't it? What did I say to myself when I looked in the mirror? I
Just
thought,
wondering.
Man, you're getting older.
It's a privilege.
I mean, it's a great question because it's a different answer every time.
For everyone.
For everyone.
Yeah.
And we all have those voices. We have that good voice and that bad voice. We have our own shadow. When you look at yourself, are you giving yourself love or are you criticizing yourself?
I was not giving myself love when I looked in the mirror.
A few of us
You
were.
should. You're cool.
No, I was not, and there are times when I do, but I wasn't this morning. And you asked me about this morning,
Yeah.
and that was that.
Yeah.
Great to talk to you. Thank you so
Talking to you.
much.
Thanks a lot.
Really
Yeah.
nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.